Right. Let's get this stream going. Let me tweet this out. Right. So, The Acolyte, episode 8, the finale. There we go. Okay, now let's change this over. And we are done. Let me just double check the sound. Excellent. So yes, here we go with our final Acolyte pre-watch party. Episode 8. Obviously, when we come to the next series, which is Skeleton Crew, I'm just going to make sure my glasses are not all fogged up. When we come to Skeleton Crew, we'll do the same thing. Before every episode, we'll have a nice little pre-watch party. I am going to be streaming Outlaws at the end of August when it comes out, so I'll do that here as well. Hey Dion, how are you doing? Somehow that just made my glasses even blurrier. Let me try. I've got actual wet wipe down here. Let me try that. I've just cleaned the webcam, so I'm gonna now use the same technique to clean the glasses, and hopefully, nope, they're still smudged. So yes, how are we? How are you doing, Dion? I think that'll do. It'll clear itself up in time. I can still see. Just a little smudgy. So yeah, how are we all doing? How are we feeling about the finale? Are we confident? Are we feeling alright about it? I'm going to reserve myself for a little while before I give my full opinions, or potential feelings, I should say. Ready for tonight's episode. What are your thoughts, Dion, on the show so far? I'd be very interested, because I know that we kind of have general discussions here, but now that we've kind of gotten 7 episodes deep and there's only 1 to go, I'm interested in finding out how people feel about the show. And, again, feel free to be honest, whether it's good, bad, in the middle. I'm open to all opinions. If you love it, hate it, don't really mind it, it's all good to me. Because I feel a mixture of all of those emotions about different elements of this show. There's parts of it I love, parts of it I hate, parts of it I'm okay with. So, yes, let me know how you all feel about the show up to this point. For some reason you've not gotten into this series. That's understandable. I've seen that opinion quite a lot online. I've seen a lot of people say that it's just not been for them. They've just not managed to get into it. And I think because it is a bit of a different story, it's a different style of story for Star Wars. Whether some people have just not been able to feel it after episode 3. I will say that earlier this week, I did rewatch the first 5 episodes with some friends. Apologies, that's Zuko up on the cat tree, scratching away there. I did rewatch the series, the first 5 episodes, with some friends, because some of them hadn't seen it. So we after watching The Boys, we sat, because that's what we normally do. We normally, every Sunday, Monday, we sit down, we catch up on the week's television together. And because we're running out of things to watch, a couple of friends hadn't seen The Acolyte, so they said, well, can we watch that? And we thought, yeah, it'd be easy enough. It's only like 25 minutes, half an hour. And we got through 5 episodes in one evening. And, I think the reaction was the same as what a lot of people have generally found, that first 2 episodes, there's a very encouraging kind of, yeah, this is interesting. It clearly has some issues, but it's got a good premise to build on. Episode 3 kind of really fell flat on the rewatch. Episodes 4 and 5 held up all right on their own, but there was kind of a foreboding sense of like, not quite sure. And, we counted. And in episode 2, there was 12. If you include the wipe to credits, there was 12 transitional wipes in episode 2 alone. That's crazy. For an episode that was only like half an hour, 35 minutes long. There was one where there's 2 wipes in episode 4 in the space of 20 seconds for the same scene when Chimera and May arrive on the planet that Kalnaka's on. That was crazy. I think episode 4 had more transitional wipes than any other episode. However, it is Star Wars content. Not sure if the acting or written poorly. I would say it's a bit of both. I'd say that the acting in some parts has been a letdown. In roles that it's really needed. The twins, more or less. They really needed to be on point because they are the central focus. And, obviously with kids, it is going to be difficult to find really competent kid actors. And that's something you have to accept when you start to base your premise around kids. And that's why I'm a little concerned about Skeleton Crew, because clearly in this show, the sort of younger twins have only been in 2 episodes. But it's been blaringly obvious that their acting has not been great. And then I think, is it Amanda Stelberg? I can't remember her name. The actor who plays May and Osha. She's not been great. But also the writing, the dialogue has been very clunky. Hey, Dylan. I was just telling people about the rewatch that we were doing for the Acolyte. And, how on second watch, there is definitely a different feel to it. My opinion of the show hasn't necessarily changed, but I think the flaws have been highlighted a lot more rewatching it kind of back to back to back, because it does feel a bit clunkier than I imagined it would be. Yeah, oof, exactly. The question is, what about the direction? I feel like I don't know if it's the direction or the editing that has really kind of made it feel clunky. The editing in parts, yes, because some scenes feel so out of whack and chronologically don't make sense. Some of the cuts are a bit I don't know. It just feels like you get thrown out the moment sometimes. The direction, yeah, I feel like, very often some of the scenes feel like it was a first take and they were like, yeah, that's fine. We got it on the first take. And then you go back and watch it and you're like, actually, no, you didn't get it on the first take. You could have done better, So, yeah. Not so great the second time around. Yeah, that's kind of my feel, is like, I still don't think it's a bad show. I feel like it has an interesting premise. The first 2 episodes set it up really well. The flashback episode really kind of put a dent in the progress of the show. And episodes 4 and 5 specifically really helped to pick it back up. And 6, again, kind of like episode 4, it was a bit of a placeholder. Take it or leave it. And then episode 7, the last episode for me, was just not good. I just, and the longer I've had to kind of, sit on it, I've just decided that episode 7 doesn't get any better with time, because a lot of it is wasted. A lot of the flashback stuff is wasted. And I made a video earlier in the week, saying that, the finale is concerning me. In episode 7, it feels like the story they were trying to tell was from the perspective of like a Benoit Blanc Knives Out tale, and they just did not execute it anywhere near as good as Rian Johnson did in Knives Out. So, it's really been let down by that. How many goddamn wipes do we count? 40 plus, and we skipped a few episodes too. Yeah, I was saying in episode 2 we counted 12. Episode 4, I think there was 13 or 14. We stopped counting in episode 5 because we wanted to watch the action, because the action was really good, so we didn't really care. But there was at least 6 or 7 in that. I'll give them the due. In episode 5, it actually felt like the transitional wipes were much more suited, because it was going from like action scene to action scene or location to location. Episode 1, I think there was at least 10. Episode 3, I don't think there was that many, because it was a flashback episode. and we haven't gone back through episode 6 and 7. So in those first 5 episodes, there's probably at least 30, and we hadn't, like I say, we hadn't really counted that much in episode 5, and we hadn't gone back and rewatched 6 and 7. It's not like the other series where you can marathon the series and be entertained. Yeah, it kind of feels like it's neither here nor there. I feel like, up until the 5th episode, I was thinking, okay, they're taking the time with the story, and this will be much better on a rewatch. And to be fair, the first 2 episodes really do link together well. First 2 episodes, I feel are solid. Despite acting issues, pacing issues, because there are those in there, I feel like they built a really good premise for the story. They gave a foundation that could have built a really good season. And there's just really this juddering episode in the flashback in episode 3 that takes you right out of it. And, initially I kind of didn't mind episode 3. I didn't mind the flashback that much because, it was interesting to see this different perspective, have these new characters introduced. Yeah, I hated the young twins at first. That hasn't changed. But, kind of going back with perspective now and seeing all of the kind of scenes again and knowing what happened in last week's episode, it feels so wasted. It feels like episode 3 didn't really need to happen. We could have just, not gotten that at all and had the flashback in the one episode, in episode 7. That would have explained everything we needed to know. There was no need for the extra perspective. I feel like even having the flashbacks, if they had decided to take this more than one season, have the mystery be more than one season long, it would have served really well to have the flashback in a different season. And this whole season we're kind of left to guess what happened on Brendok. What was this fire they were talking about? What did Soul and the other Jedi do? Let it stew a bit. But instead they kind of feel like they've rushed into it. You can't even really pick out an episode and enjoy it on its own. I feel like episode 5 you can. If you're just into the action, episode 5 you can pick out on your own and kind of enjoy it. Like I say, I think the first 2 episodes back to back are fairly enjoyable because they set up the premise for the story and they were pretty good in their own right. But again, as you start to tie everything in together, it's such a tonal whiplash throughout the season. It's kind of all over the place. At least with The Mandalorian, you always pop into a random episode from the first 2 seasons, have a decent time. Yeah, Mandalorian being more episodic, because you can, up until the last 2 episodes of season 1, and I guess the last episode of season 2, you don't necessarily need to know much about the story, because a lot of them are just side quest adventures that are building up the world. But yeah. Hey Hayden, how are you doing? Welcome to the stream. But I honestly, if we're going to talk about the finale, and from what I've heard is that the runtime is going to be very similar to episode 7. So that means about 44 minutes all in, which means about 35 minutes of episode content. And I just don't see how we can get a satisfactory conclusion to everything that's been going on. It's going to feel very rushed. And that was my big fear coming into this, is that the last few episodes, they've not really done much to tie up some of the loose ends. And if, as Leslie Headland, I think, said in an interview, that this is going to be a self-contained story within this season, that means that any loose threads are going to get tied up in this one episode. And I just don't see how they're going to be able to do that in an enjoyable and convincing way, because, we've still got to find out what's going to happen with the fallout with the twins and their respective, people that they're with. There is a space scene with, Soul chasing, presumably May and, Osha and Chimera, I should say, in Chimera's ship. That we've got to find out what happened with the twins and the Convergence. We've got to obviously have a showdown between Chimera and Soul, find out what happened with Chimera, what was his history with the Jedi. There's everything with Venestra. We've seen this week Venestra has these high Senate robes that look really good, but that means that she's going to have a scene at the High Senate. That means there's more stuff that she's going to not be involved with, and she might even get involved with Chimera and Soul. directly, and then there's the potential of any, like, I called them Sith shenanigans. You know, like, if there's going to be a tease for, like, a Plagueis or a Tenebris, or a new Sith character. Dealing with the emotional fallout of if Osha decides to turn to the dark side, you know, it's all stuff that you've got to handle very subtly, and I just don't see how they're going to be able to do it in half an hour. I feel like if we do get a Sith tease, like if we get a Tenebris or a Plagueis tease, it is going to be in the after credits. If there's an after credits scene, it's not going to be like a very long scene at all. It's going to be like a little tease to say, oh, if there's a season 2, we're going to delve into the actual Sith, which is what I thought this season was going to be, you know? I thought that this season was going to be the perspective of the Sith. Like, honest to God, I've seen the hashtag renew the Acolyte this week. And I will be bluntly honest and say, I am not bothered either way. I will not be sad if the show doesn't get renewed. And likewise, it won't bother me if it gets a second season. I'll watch a second season. Because I'll be interested to see what they might want to do. But, being honest, the only thing that could really capture my interest in a potential season 2 right now would be following Chimera and potentially a Sith Master. You know? Like, go full on dark side this episode. Kill Soul. Kill Osha. Kill May. Have Chimera be the sole survivor. And, you know, his master shows up maybe to save him at the last minute. And, you know, then season 2, we follow that story along. You know, maybe pick up with Venestra. Venestra's having to deal with the fallout whilst also simultaneously seeing what Chimera is doing with, you know, the Sith. Star Wars Social's already switching the language from series finale to season finale. Yeah, I mean, honestly, like, being in the UK, it's always confusion because series and season are the same thing. Like, we call them series. And I think it's seasons in America, so to me it's always been a bit confusing, but it definitely feels like they've already made the decision to pull a trigger on a second season. Because from what I understand, the viewing figures have been fairly strong. Like, not as strong as Ahsoka, which is understandable, because Ahsoka was always going to be better, just like Kenobi was. Like, you're taking established characters that have a fan base. You're never going to get as strong numbers with a brand new show with unknown characters. But from what I understand is the viewing figures have been fairly strong given all of that. So they probably think, well, you know, sure, why not pull the trigger on a second season? If the second season does poorly, then we'll pull the plug. I just really hope that they do better with the story, the money that they've spent, because again, I'm still struggling to see where the money was spent for this series. Like, it doesn't necessarily look super cheap, though I definitely feel like the CGI has been a bit underwhelming in parts, like the speeder bike last week. Like, the CGI for the speeder bike felt really off. And, you know, some of the sets haven't necessarily felt very convincing, but at the same time, there's been some nice location shots. The models for some of the ships look really good. You know, the costumes have been fantastic. But again, it's just kind of like, if this was the costed equivalent of another movie, it's like, maybe we should have just done a movie instead. I don't foresee them doing a second season for 2 years. I don't know why, it feels like these days that's the norm. Like, you know, everyone's talking about, you know, 8 episodes is the new norm. It feels like now, like, 2 years between seasons is the new norm. And I just don't quite understand it. Like, I know that back in the day, shows were run on a much tighter budget, so they were better and more efficient than they are now. Star Trek, for example, I know it's the easy go-to, but Star Trek in the 90s, The Next Generation, 24 episodes plus a season every year. You know, you think about that, and it's a constant machine just chugging out, like, you know, episode after episode, and there's constantly people writing and filming, you know, and yeah, it's probably grueling for the people involved, but it's doable on a budget, and, you know, that was done on a much cheaper budget than any show today. So it's not a question of whether you can do it or not. You absolutely can, especially if you've got the money for it. But I just feel like sometimes there's so much indecision and inefficiency from the behind-the-scenes point of view. And it's not just Star Wars. Like, even House of the Dragon, Rings of Power, Stranger Things, The Boys, they're all taking like 2 to 3 years between seasons to get new content out. And I don't know if it's because companies now have so many things on the go that they're like, oh, you know what? You can take 2 years because we've got this other show we want to come out, but we don't have anywhere to put it. So we'll put it in your usual time slot, and you can just take an extra year. Because you look at Amazon, Netflix, they've got shows constantly churning out. Some of them better than others, some of them more mainstream than others, but I don't know. Just there's so much changed in the last 5 years alone. Ever since like the pandemic, like streaming has become a weird formula that has changed, the way TV shows work. Because I'm trying to remember, like you think of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones was a season every year, 10 episodes. Until they got to the latter seasons, but that wasn't from a lack of wanting more. The producers turned down the wishes of the studio to do more episodes in those final 2 seasons. But they still managed to get a very well-produced, good-looking show out every year with 10-hour-long episodes. And it feels like that art is lost, and I don't know why. Driving home from work, but here to listen. Well, welcome, Ian. Hopefully my dulcet tones will not force you to sleep and then crash. Please don't fall asleep whilst you're driving, because that would be terrible. We don't want anyone crashing. And I know, trust me, I know from driving some long journeys in the past, it's easy to fall asleep behind the wheel. I don't know why. You put me behind the wheel of a car when I'm tired, and like it's the only situation where I actually feel like it's easy to fall asleep. Like I struggle to fall asleep in most places, like especially if I've got nothing to do the next day or if I really need some sleep. But if I'm driving or in a meeting, something important, and my body's just like, hey, you know what? Sleep would be good right now. Yeah. Not lost, it's become more about the money. Which is, it's odd because you think about, HBO and how much money they must have made off of Game of Thrones. I know it's different now because obviously it's all subscription based. I think that's the problem. Is because now it's less about advertising revenue and how much the shows are willing to pump in, to writers, because it used to be a case of they needed it every year so they could renew the sponsorships for like the advertisements, the commercials. That's where their money really got driven from. Obviously in America, I know it's slightly different here. We've only got Sky as the main kind of provider for TV shows. That's where we get like Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, and all that. And that's the way it's been for a long time. But now the main income for these shows is from the subscriptions, like the monthly subscription. So that's why they have to have so many things being pumped out one after the next. So we're getting sidetracked anyway. We're here to talk about The Acolyte, episode 8. So do we have any theories going into this episode? Because the only thing that we know from the trailer so far is that there is going to be a space scene where, again, presumably Soul is chasing down Osha and Chimere through the rings of the planet near Brendok. I think that they crash on Brendok, and there's going to be like a final showdown between the two parties. But it's like, who's going to come out alive? Who's going to, I think one of the twins, I think May might die. And there's this talk about convergence, about them being two separate consciousness. Like maybe they'll merge together and it'll end up being the one person. That's what I mean is, like, this show so far, it's kind of been vague in its, like, mystery around the twins. it's kind of like, I know what they're trying to hint at. They're trying to hint that they are two separate entities, but one consciousness. So they're one person split into two. And so the only way for them to truly be whole is for them to be rejoined. And I feel like that'll be done through one of them dying. But it's not been especially tantalizing in the way that they've tried to deliver it. And again, I think that's because there's been so much going on. There's been so much, it's gotten kind of lost in the shuffle. It's always been about money, however, with, like you had just said, it's about advertisements, now it's about subscriptions. Yes, that's it. It's about them keeping hold of that $7.99 or whatever it is a month. I mean, I know after this, I'm going to be cancelling my Disney Plus subscription because there's nothing going to be watchable until December when Skeleton Crew comes out. So I'm not going to waste, whatever it might be, 20, 30 quid for 2-3 months of Disney Plus that I'm not going to use. At the same time as like potentially having to pay for Netflix and stuff like that. So no. One sacrificing themselves for the other. That's the potential. That's the most likely scenario. Is maybe Chimera kills May. May steps in the way of like I can foresee it now. Osha is like ready to fall to the dark side based on everything she's learned. Chimera's there trying to push her. Soul and May have showed up on the other side. I just don't quite know how May is going to react because, the flashback doesn't necessarily make Soul seem any better. I can't see how May is going to be sympathetic to Soul, given his perspective. I thought before the episode, like, we'd get the old switcheroo where Osha would be more sympathetic to Chimera and might fall to the dark side, and May might be more sympathetic to Soul and might not want to kill him. But I don't quite see how that's going to be possible, just given what we know now. Because honestly, Soul didn't come out of that last episode particularly great. And don't get me wrong, I don't necessarily blame him for taking defensive action against, their mother when she turned into the smoke demon. I'd probably have done the same thing. It was a bit of a stupid move on her part to turn into a demon-looking thing and right in front of a Jedi who's already on edge because you got weapons pointed at him. Like, it's not the best move. So I just like maybe Chimera will kill May and Osha or May will save Osha, like sacrificing herself. I don't know. I really don't. Either way, I think Soul will probably die. Unless this is going to be a situation where everyone dies because someone just shows up and cleans house. Like, my original theory is that Venestra might have shown up and just cleaned house because she wants to cover everything up. Which I know people who have read the books probably wouldn't be impressed with that because, Venestra, whilst not being a main character by any stretch of the imagination, and, obviously this being many, many years later, from what I've been told, because I've not gotten to that point in the novels yet, it does feel very out of character for Venestra to be doing this kind of stuff. But again, many decades later, people can change. Hey, Zabagek, how you doing? We're just talking theories on the finale. Because again, I'm kind of like last week I said to everyone, I'm intrigued because I can't pinpoint what is going to happen. Now, unfortunately, last week's episode, the reason I couldn't pinpoint what was going to happen is because what happened was the boringly obvious, like the most simple explanation that wasn't really interesting at all. Like, oh, it was just a fire. It was kind of just like, the witches jumping the gun in a way. Soul being a bit creepy. The Jedi kind of being a little bit... Well, I suppose Torben and Soul, more than Kalnaka and Indara, kind of being a little bit more forceful than they should. But it was kind of a whole mess, wasn't it? And like, I did like certain elements. Like, I liked how Indara was the wise master who was like, look, we're not supposed to interfere. We shouldn't be testing these kids. We should just leave them alone. catalog this planet, get back to Coruscant, you know? If they'd have all followed her lead, then nothing would have happened. And I like that because I think most people were under the assumption that Indara was probably going to be the one that instigated everything. And I liked how Torben was kind of like, homesick. I'd say out of all of the characters there, Soul came across as a bit weird. Because, like, his infatuation with the twins seemingly came out of nowhere. And it's like, again, I feel like I understood what they were trying to portray. Like, Soul is desperate for an apprentice, like a Padawan. Just like Chimera is desperate for a pupil. They're trying to parallel the story. But firstly, it's not been done in a very clever way, or a subtle way. The issue with that I had with Soul in the last episode, and him saying that, he wants the Padawan, is that it seemingly just manifested suddenly and in such a creepy way. Like, all of a sudden, the first time he lays eyes on these two twins, it's like they're the most fascinating thing he's ever seen, and he's obsessed with them. And it is creepy because, like, they're little girls, and he's suddenly like, I must protect them with my life. It's like, okay, back off, dude. It's a bit strange that you suddenly have an infatuation with them, And then, it feels very out of character because, yes, he's got an affinity towards Osha in the present. And, there's history there, but it just didn't feel like the same Soul in a way. Even between the two flashbacks. The Soul in episode 3 felt very different to the Soul in episode 7. And again, whether that was just because they were trying to do this weird kind of like altered perspective thing, or whether it was like they just really didn't think it through, I'm not sure. Like I say, I honestly feel like they were trying to do the Knives Out thing where it's like you get introduced to a story from one perspective, it's a murder mystery, and you follow along with, characters' perspectives, and then you revisit the events from either a different perspective, or they start to reveal things that didn't quite look the way they were. And so you start to have this discovery of events that you've already seen, but you're now seeing them in a different light. And done well, it's great. I love Knives Out. Knives Out is a fantastic movie. Glass Onion is good, not as good as Knives Out, but they're both the same type of storytelling. They're both the same kind of like mystery puzzle that you have to go back and re-watch to see everything falling into place. That done well can really make a story great with, not a lot in it. And I feel like they've tried to do it here, and it's just been like all over the place, and it's really not worked that well. I really don't know if they will wrap all the storyline, even though we have been told they will. I think they will wrap, because you think about it. May, Osha, Soul, and Chimera are the main players here. Venestra is the outside player. They're probably, Soul, May, Osha, and Chimera are probably all going to be together at some point. But I just feel like, it's going to end up with at least 2 of them dying. I don't know which 2. And it's just, I can guarantee by the end of it, you're going to be feeling like, okay, well, that didn't quite end the way I thought it would, or it's not going to feel as rewarding, and it's going to be like, well, it's not the way I would have done it. It's not the way I foresaw it going. It should have had a bit more time, or they should have just focused on one element rather than the other. It's like I said in the video, it's like they're trying to tell like 2 or 3 different stories. You've got the story of the twins, and their purpose, their reunification. You've got the story of Chimera and his search for a pupil. And then you've got the story of Soul and the Jedi and what happened on Brendok. And his, journey to absolution. Or at least acceptance of what he did. And they're trying to tie them all in together, and it's just not worked in 8 episodes. It's like, you really needed to trim down on some stuff. Save some stuff for another time. And that's why I say the twin stuff should have been saved for much, much later on. Like, the mystery stuff should have been pushed further down the line. Like, focus solely on, Chimera, his introduction, his desire for a pupil. There was, obviously, bring the twins in. give this element of like what did happen. Was there a cover up by the Jedi? But you just tease it. You don't go into detail just yet. And this might be the issue of them saying like, okay, we don't know if there's going to be more than one season. I feel like if they'd have gone to the showrunner and the writers and said, okay, we're going to give you 2 to 3 seasons to plan out, guaranteed, do what you need to do. I feel like that would have given them the impetus to say, okay, we can spread this mystery over multiple season arcs. And instead, because they were like, well, we think it might just be one season, that's made them panic, and they've been like, right, we've got all this stuff we want to put in, we all want to get it done now in this 8 episodes. What time does the episode come out? In 1 hour and 10 minutes. So in about 70 minutes time, 2 o'clock in the morning UK time, 9 o'clock Eastern, and what is that, 6 o'clock Pacific? Am I right in thinking? Have I got my time zones correct? I don't know. Time zones always confuse me as a European. I will be thankful for the fact that, I'm not going to have to be up late on a Wednesday anymore. Because, it does kill me getting up early on the Wednesday mornings after doing these reactions. Because, even though I'm on a late shift and I wake up, at like 9 o'clock rather than 7, it's still only like 4 hours sleep. So it still does kill me a bit. But, I'm just realising now how far away December is. Like, obviously, in about a month and a half, we'll have Outlaws. And again, I'll be playing that on the channel here. So, stick around, because I'm going to have videos out. We'll talk. I've got the plan for the week coming up is to do a full-on review of the series. Do like an episode-by-episode breakdown. Which, will probably be quite a detailed video. So if it's not, by this weekend, it might be later into next week. I do have, hopefully, the very first lightsaber review. I think I'm getting sent a lightsaber, which is going to be my very first one. So, hopefully that'll go down well. I'm still waiting for that to arrive. And then, there's going to be other videos as well talking about the future of Star Wars. Then we're going to have Outlaws at the end of August that I'll be streaming. Then we got Skeleton Crew coming up in December. So, yeah. How many hours left before the finale? We just got over 1 hour. Just over 1 hour before the finale. So, not long. Not long. But, yes. Still a young buck. I'm in my mid-30s now. I get tired easy. Especially, I had a very active weekend as well, so I'm still catching up on sleep from the weekend just gone, because it was a very active weekend. But yeah, like I say, with this finale, the problem is, I feel like we've gotten to a point now where like people feel shoehorned into their opinions, and this counts for both sides. The controversy leading up to this show and the hate surrounding it did not do anyone a service, because obviously you've got the people who decide to hate on it because they grift, because they make money off of hating it. You get the people who are drawn into that and decide they hate it because the people that they like to watch hate it, and so they'll never give it a good chance anyway. But then I feel like on the opposite side of the scale, there's people who feel like they need to defend the show, so they will say it's great just because they feel the need to fight back. And I feel like, people will now feel like if they enjoyed the first few episodes, but then started to realise, actually, I'm not as big of a fan of this show as I thought. It's kind of like, but I don't want to give any fuel to the people who don't like it if I start to say, well, it's not that good. So it's kind of like, I feel like people will be shoehorned in to say that it was good when they feel like maybe it's dropped off. And likewise, there might be people who didn't like it who might feel a bit shoehorned into saying that it's not good when they might have thought it was alright. Because the opinion scale is so strong now, and you criticise for having an opinion. Like with Black Ops guy saying that he hopes it gets cancelled. I mean, I don't understand that perspective, because, like, wishing something to get cancelled is a bit weird, because it's like, if you don't like the show that much, you just need to not watch it, I said I won't be sad if the show doesn't get a second season, but I'm not rooting for it to be cancelled because, you know, at the end of the day, more Star Wars content is always good. Like, yeah, I feel like things should be done better. I feel like there is definitely a need for a shake-up, and for, you know, more responsibility to be put on the showrunners and, you know, consistency. But cancelling stuff is not necessarily the way to go, or at least rooting for cancellation, because it's like, if you don't like something, just don't watch it. And actively cancelling something does mean that people lose their jobs, and it's kind of like, you know, we're not talking about the actors and the showrunners who are probably pretty well off. You know, we're talking about, like, the crew, the writers, the people who, you know, live month to month. So, you know, it's like, by all means, feel free to say you don't like the show. And you know, but just don't watch it. If you don't like it and it gets a second season, just don't watch the second season. You know? The episode will drop in about an hour's time. So you made your first one in 1978, was badass for its time. I took back now and realised how amateur it was built as compared to the ones made now. Well, the amazing thing is that the only reason that I've decided to do this is because the company who contacted me wants to send me the Return of the Jedi Luke Skywalker hilt. And it's, you know, it's from everything I've seen, I've done a lot of research into the company to make sure it's all above board and genuine. And I've said to them, you know, my one criteria is that I get to be honest and open in the review. And I've said, yeah, that's fine. Be completely truthful and honest. You know, I've seen a lot of reviews and they seem to be pretty good. You know, and I won't say who it is yet because, firstly, I'm banking on them actually still sending it. They haven't. I haven't got anything yet. But, you know, you'll see if it does happen. Look at everything with honesty, not with pre-existing thoughts. Give me your pre-existing thoughts on when the episode will drop. Didn't copy anyone. I would like it if they had Plagueis. I don't give a fuck about jobs. I watch it because it's Star Wars. Well, I mean, isn't that a bit sad that you don't really care about others? Like, yeah, that's not the primary motivation for us wanting to watch. You know, we all watch because it's Star Wars. But it's like, actively saying that, you know, and this is the same with people saying, like, oh, I hope Disney go under, and I hope, you know, that, you know, this company fails. It's kind of like, you know, okay, well, I'm sure you'll get a lot of personal satisfaction about that, but what about, like, the normal people who work at these companies who'd be out of the job? You know, who does that really serve? You know, it's kind of like a bit of a selfish viewpoint. It's like, by all means, have your own opinions on whether you like a show or not, but, like, the people involved, like the catering crew, you know, the stagehands, you know, they don't have any say in the show. They just do their job. You know, and it's kind of like, I honestly think that it is this kind of mentality of where, like, once you've decided that you don't like something, and vice versa, once you've decided that you're going to like something, it's very hard to change your opinion on that, even if you actually start to enjoy it. Like, if you watched the trailer to this show, and you looked at that and went, I'm not sure about that, and you went and watched your favourite YouTuber, and your favourite YouTuber said, nah, that's terrible, this is trash, it's woke, there's genders, and so you then go, yeah, this is terrible, I knew it, I had that feeling, and you start to watch it, and you actually go, oh, you know what, it's not that bad, I'm actually kind of okay with it, but then your brain is like, but everyone else that I associate with says it's trash, and it's terrible. Like, you're gonna force yourself to still think, and then, yeah, no, actually, it's still terrible. Still terrible. And likewise, you know, if you come into this, like, saying, this show's getting so much hate before it's even aired, so I'm going to defend it, and I'm going to say it's good. And, you know, the first couple of episodes, you enjoy it, and then you start to realise, oh, it's probably not as good as I thought. But in your head, because there's people still hating on it, you want to defend it. Because, you know, you've got that ingrained in you, and you might not be able to say to yourself, actually, no, this isn't that good. You know, you might not feel able to say that out loud. So people just need to stand back and be objective. Like, I try and stay away from internet opinions on any show. I didn't say who gives a fuck about people. I mean, that kind of summarizes the fandom menace attitude, isn't it? It's kind of like, oh, what about me? What about me? It's all about me. I want what I want. Shows should cater to my will. You know, Star Wars should be what I want it to be. It's like, dude, that's a very selfish attitude. You know, you can have your opinions by all means, but, you know, if someone calls you out for, you know, having selfish attitudes, then That's the consequences of, your opinion. And I get the feeling like if Plagueis showed up in this episode, you'd still call it terrible. There'd still be something about Darth Plagueis. Like, he could show up exactly as he was, in Legends. In all of his moon glory. He could be written exactly as was expected to be. And you would still find something to hate on. You'd still say, well, yeah, but, this, and that. He didn't do this, or he didn't sound like that, or he's written by this person. It's kind of like, there's no pleasing some people because they're ingrained in their opinion. Once you decide you don't like something, no matter what they do, you're not going to like it, even if they give you everything you wanted. Because you've decided, Disney, woke, agendas. It's kind of like, can we not just be grown-ups about it? And just be like, okay, I liked it originally, but now I'm not so sure. Or I didn't like it originally, I wasn't interested in the premise, but actually, I've watched it and I think it's alright. People can change their opinions. You can come into something and have your opinion changed throughout the course of a show. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong if a show doesn't do anything for you. Not every Star Wars show is catering to the same people. I'm not massively into this show. I think it's alright. I think it's had its ups and downs. I definitely feel it could have done a lot better, but I don't think it's this kind of trash, worst Star Wars ever that you see all of the typical grifters, shouting about every single episode. Every single episode, Nerdrotic, Star Wars Theory, Geeks and Gamers, worst Star Wars ever! It's like, alright. You're still watching it, though. Like, you've said that about every show that's ever come before. Like, every show is the worst Star Wars show ever until the next one comes along. It's like, can you not just, sit back and be objective about it and just say, yeah, it wasn't great, but these are the things I liked. You sound my Scouse roommate. I am from Merseyside. I'm not Scouse, but I am from Merseyside, so I've got a slight Scouse accent, which probably sounds stronger to people not from the Liverpool area. I've seen some of the newest sabers and some of them are amazing. However, I'm of the thought of making it myself. Yes, I would love to be able to include it, modern technology in it. Yeah, I mean, if you can do it yourself, it saves you money because they are expensive. I think the one that I've been sent is like $250. But likewise, it's apparently very sturdy and very, it's essentially movie quality prop light. I don't know. I'll guess I'll find out if it arrives. Do you think people will view the sequels and poorly received Star Wars show more positively in the future, like what happened with the prequels? I think it depends. I think that the prequels only get a better reception these days because the sequels came along for people to hate on. And don't get me wrong, anyone who knows anything about me knows that I have very mixed opinions on the sequels. I really liked The Force Awakens. I really didn't like The Last Jedi. And I really, really didn't like The Rise of Skywalker. But because that came along and took everyone's attention away from the prequels, suddenly the prequels became much better. And George Lucas suddenly became this great storyteller. Despite the fact that I think, even George, by his own admission, isn't the best director in the world. He's great at conceptualizing stories and innovating technology and being very progressive in, the entertainment industry. George Lucas has been a massive impact on the movie industry because he's used his success as a power for change. He has introduced ILM, Pixar, through the people that he has hired and given jobs. We got Photoshop. John Knoll created Photoshop with his brother. That might not have happened if he hadn't been employed by George Lucas, and worked at ILM. And, they developed some of the earliest motion tracking cameras. It's like every step of the way, and this is what George has already said, that he wants every story to be different. He wants every movie that he makes to progress the movie industry in some way, shape, or form. So George is far better in his ideas and his desire to improve, the industry than sometimes he is at being a director. And that's why, the original trilogy, he only directed one of the 3 movies because he realised, firstly, I can't handle all this on my own. There are people who can take my materials and make it better. And, then when it came to the prequels and he was the sole director, you can see how some really good ideas in principle. You can tell that he really wanted to push forward the use of digital technology, but it just wasn't quite there. But there was no one to tell him, George, maybe this isn't the best way of doing it. Maybe these stories aren't quite as tight as they should be. He didn't have a Lawrence Kasdan to help him, tighten up the script, or an Aaron Kirshner to help direct the actors on set to get the best performances. It's like George Lucas is a massive, massive force behind Star Wars, obviously. But to say that he is the sole reason for its success is completely disregarding so many other people who contributed. The editors, the actors, the directors, the writers, the producers, everyone had a hand in it. But, as history progresses, people tend to have a much more beneficial view of things. Like, a lot of you mightn't have been around on the internet when the prequels came out, but the prequels were shat on, like, by the internet. Obviously, again, the internet is not the opinion of the entire world. Most people were just like, yeah, the prequels are okay. They're a bit weird. They didn't quite feel like Star Wars at times, but the internet shat on them for the longest time. And they were saying the same things that they say now. Oh, this isn't Star Wars. This isn't George Lucas' Star Wars. That's what they were saying about the prequels. When the Phantom Menace came out, like, the trailer was, like, weird. It was like, oh, that doesn't quite have the same vibe, because George was trying something different. And I think that's the problem, is too many people don't realise that, and they're repeating the same thing over and over. So, in 20 years' time, the sequels will probably be viewed a bit more favourably. I don't think that people will ever still universally love them, but I certainly don't feel like they'll be the hot topic of debate like they are now. Some of us are still not fans of the prequels, having stood in line for Empire and Return of the Jedi. Massive force in the film industry, period. I think part of the issue these days is that people have too much help, too many cooks, is why the sequels are all over the place. The sequels are all over the place because they didn't have a consistent story. They rushed it out. It wasn't the fact that there was too many people involved. It was the fact that it was different people and there wasn't one consistent person involved. Sometimes it's good to have a George Lucas at the top because he can keep the story level. He can plan out the story. The sequels realistically should have had the same people writing it and, if possible, directing it. Problem is, you had JJ come in, write up a story. I mean, it was Michael Arndt that was supposed to write the initial draft for The Force Awakens, and they got rid of him because he wasn't doing it quick enough. So you had Lawrence Kasdan and JJ Abrams come in and write up a script. Not really given much thought to what was coming next. They handed that over to Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson had to pick up the pieces. He wrote his own version of what was going on. And then Colin Trevorrow was going to obviously do his own thing. They dropped him. It had to go back to JJ, and JJ was then trying to connect the story back to what he was trying to do and undid some of the stuff in The Last Jedi. And that's why it was a mess, because there was no consistency. Not necessarily about the amount of people, just about the consistency of it. You need the same people involved over and over, and that's what, Kathleen Kennedy should have done better with. She should have had an overall producer in charge, an overall writer in charge of the whole thing. So, I love the prequels. They have flaws, but they still feel so authentically Star Wars. I was also 5 years old when The Phantom Menace came out, so they're Star Wars movies of my childhood. Yeah, that's kind of like one of the things that it depends on what Star Wars you grew up with, because that's what's going to feel like Star Wars to you. I grew up just before the prequels came out, so my first experience was the original trilogy. I I think that now the prequels feel like Star Wars because we've accepted those differences as being Star Wars. You know, you accept that they're different eras in both the story and in the times they were made. Hey, buddy, what are you doing? And you know, you then begin to accept it. It took a while for that to be accepted by the larger audience, but now it mostly is accepted. And yeah, some people still don't like them. I mean, I'm certainly still not a fan of Attack of the Clones. I think that movie is pretty bad. You know, but it's kind of like, it's just, it is what it is now. It's like, they're there. I appreciate them for what they are, and I think that's the same opinion for most people. Prequel trailers spoiled the entire movie. They were literally just a summary of the plot. I think because we already knew kind of what was going to happen in the prequels, because again, Anakin to Darth Vader, Fall of the Jedi, I think that they could take a bit more. And to be fair, movie trailers were a bit more like that back in the day. You know, so they could have a bit more liberty with the trailers because they were like, well, people already know roughly what's going to happen. They know Anakin and Obi-Wan are going to fight. You know, you're never a fan of the last trilogy. When you say last trilogy, do you mean the sequels, Dion? But yeah, you know, it kind of all ties back into current day now, where it's like all of this stuff is being driven. Like 90% of people don't care for the online discourse. Like, they didn't come into this show saying it was going to be terrible or great. They don't care about the perceived agendas, you know. They don't care about whether YouTubers like them or not. They just kind of, 90% of people will just sit there, watch, and make their own decision on if they like it or not. You know? And most people will probably say, yeah, it was alright. You know, it was a bit weird. Probably not for me. But it wasn't that bad. You know? Certainly the two extremes of worst Star Wars ever, and I love this, it's the best thing ever, please give me season 2. They are the extremes. They are the outliers. They are the minority. Most people kind of in here between, it's a good show, to, it's not for me. And everything in between. And most of them are not online. What do you hope for this last episode? What do I hope? I hope that we get a satisfying conclusion, but I am 99% certain that we're not going to get it. 99% certain that we're going to get a rushed finale that's not going to feel very rewarding at all. Hey, El, how you doing? What does everyone think? What does everyone think is going to happen? What do we think is going to happen in the finale? Like, because all that I can see is going to happen is Osha might start to turn to the dark side. May, the thing is, I can't imagine how May's going to react, because Soul does not come across as any better now than he did before. I thought the flashback would kind of give Soul some kind of a reason to kind of give May, like, sympathy towards him, but I don't see how May can have sympathy towards him, given that everything she saw is what happened. So why would her perspective change? So they're going to have their conversations. Then Soul is going to chase Osha and Kymir to Brendok, I think. Then they're going to have a showdown. People might die. Venestra might get involved somehow. There might be a Sith Lord. That's the problem. I just don't know. I just don't know where it's going. How am I feeling? I'm doing all right. How are you feeling, El? You know, how are you doing? I was sorry to hear about your loss. So I hope you're doing all right. I'm just tired. You know, it was a long weekend and sleep has not caught up yet, and it's early in the morning. But you know, I'm up. I'm here. I'm ready to go. You'd like to see Yoda. I don't think we will see Yoda. If we do, it'll be a background appearance. Certainly, I don't think he will have a talking role. And I don't know if I really want him to, because, oh my god, that's just going to open up a whole nother can of worms for online grifters to be like, oh, Yoda's there, and he should be here, and he should have taken control and done all this, or he should have sensed that Venestra had something going on. She was covering something up because the Jedi are all-knowing and all-seeing, and it's like, I can't be bothered with more of that discourse. Like, the idea that the Jedi are perfect is just... For people who claim to understand Star Wars, sometimes they really don't. Like, pretending that the Jedi are perfect and they should know everything. It's like, man, did you not watch the original trilogy? Did you not watch the prequels? The Jedi were flawed. They got tricked so easily. Like, you know, they're just people. Yes, they have a heightened sense for things that are going on. They have a heightened sense of morals. They're supposed to be good. Most of them are. Some of them fall short, but they are just normal people with flaws, you know? What's been told so far? What would I want to see in a potential second season? Okay, so this depending on your viewpoint, this might be controversial or not. Season 2 of The Acolyte, in my head, does away with the twins. Like, does away with the twins. Don't want to see him. Don't care about him. Don't want him here. Season 2 follows Chimera and a Sith Master. And maybe Venestra's continued attempt to cover things up if Soul doesn't survive. And her trying to, you know, deal with this Sith, you know, we slowly start to see it ramp up. We slowly start to see the Sith kind of try and formulate some kind of plan to take on the Jedi. Whilst maybe Chimera tries to, you know, outsmart his master. That's what I'd want to see from a season 2. That's what I wanted season 1 to be. So yeah, that's kind of that. You know, it's a very base premise, but that's kind of what I would want. I look like Eric from Blind Wave. Collab between you guys talking about Star Wars would be interesting. I like those guys. I've spoken to Eric before. He's really nice. Obviously, very knowledgeable. I'm too small fry for them. You know, they are like the main go-to reactors and have been for many years. But I really like those guys. I think they're great. They don't let other people influence what they enjoy. They're, you know, honest in, you know, their opinions. They just have fun. And, you know, it's kind of like what a group of friends should do. So, yeah. Hey, Steve, how you doing? You just watched all of the Acolyte episodes up to this point. Some of the acting is still wooden and pacing feels sloppy. Choreography is still awesome. Yeah, so I was saying earlier that me and my friends tend to get together on a Sunday and rewatch episodes from the week before, whether it's The Boys, House of the Dragon, Doctor Who. And this week we decided to, because a couple of them hadn't watched The Acolyte, so we decided to sit through and watch the first 5 episodes of The Acolyte. And I have to say, I thought on a rewatch it would probably feel a lot better. Like, it would smooth together, because a lot of my issues have been with pacing and structure, and, you know, obviously the time put into episodes. And I have to say, going back and rewatching hasn't made it any better. Like, first 2 episodes flow together quite well, set up an interesting premise. Episode 3 on a rewatch is kind of worse than I remember. And I think it's because now we know the actual events. You know, I think that episode 7 did a lot to undermine episode 3. Because now there's that lack of, like, ooh, what happened? And it's kind of like, oh yeah, we know what happened, and it's kind of lame. Like, I'll be honest, I don't like the reveal of what happened on Brendok. I feel like it was messy. It was too simple. Stuff just wasn't explained very well. Like, why is Soul all of a sudden obsessed with these twins out of nowhere? Why did the fire suddenly start a reactor meltdown? Why did, you know, Indara clearing Kalnaka's head kill all those witches? You know, where did Mother Coral go? Like, why did Mother Anastasia decide to go into demon form right in front of a Jedi who was already being threatened? Like, I don't blame Soul for, you know, whipping out his lightsaber and stabbing her in the stomach. Because, like, looking back at that, it's like, okay, if I saw a witch transform into demon shape in black smoke and go for the little girl who's standing opposite me, and I've got a row of witches pointing weapons at me, I'm probably going to feel threatened. I'm probably going to activate my lightsaber and, you know, take action. Like, I don't know what they were thinking there. But likewise, Soul still felt weirdly attached to the twins. And it's like I was saying earlier, I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to parallel Chimera and Soul were looking for pupils, but they just did it in such a ham-fisted way. It was just like, ugh, very messy, very messy. Episode 4 and 5, obviously episode 5 is still great. The choreography is still fantastic. I just feel like this show is trying to be philosophical for no good reason, and it's not even doing a good job at it. It's kind of like there's some lines that feel like they're trying to be Shakespearean, and it's kind of like, that doesn't make sense. You're trying too hard. And I think that's really what it is. It's kind of like the showrunners came up with an interesting premise, but then just went like try-hard mode and tried to be too fancy with it. And that's really what it is. It's a mixture of trying to be too fancy, the pacing being all off, and the acting being really wooden in places. So yeah. Cat looks like a bit like a Sith in the background. He acts like a Sith sometimes. He is a right little fucker. I think a Sith Master showing up on the finale could do a lot for potential for the future season, but I don't know if it would save this season. No, I think if we get a Plagueis or a Tenebris cameo, it will be just that, a cameo at the very end, just to tease a second season, or to have them just show up and kill everyone. Because, like, gotta cover things up. What better way than having a Dark Lord of the Sith show up? One of my new favourite reaction channels is Sorta Stupid. They're a blast to watch, and they recently watched the first 6 movies and should be watching the Clone Wars soon. Cool. It's always nice to see like new people encounter Star Wars for the first time. The reveal was kind of lame. There are still a lot of unanswered questions, even up to this point. I just imagined that it would be a bit more complicated than, oh, actually, yes, it just went down as we probably would have imagined it. There was no kind of weird goings on. There was no Jedi shenanigans. You know, yes, the Jedi acted rashly, but that's because Torben is a homesick kid. Soul was just being weirdly, you know, kind of aggressively protective of the girls that he just met. But, you know, the Jedi didn't necessarily... I wouldn't say the Jedi are to blame overall. Like, there's blame on both sides there. It's like, yeah, the Jedi should not necessarily be going in and trying to tell them, you can't train kids. Or, you know, we want to take your kids. Which was mostly on Soul. Indara was like, let's just leave them. But at the same time, the witches were, like, openly hostile. They were, you know, kind of very threatening. And, you know, the fire was just a fire. That's the thing. That's the thing, is I thought at least the fire was a cover for something more. But no, apparently the fire was just a fire. It was an old, creaky reactor that was lacking in repairs. And then apparently, like, if you mind fuck someone and then you get mind fucked yourself, you die. You know, that was kind of the problem. It's a tragic plot. Everyone makes bad choices out of ignorance. Yeah, and done well, that can be great. Like, you know, a series of unfortunate events leads to, you know, a horrible, horrible thing happening. You know, that's often, like, the start of a really good story, because that adds to the tragedy. It's like, it could be so avoidable. But it felt like it was so ham-fisted. It was just very weird. Who would I want to be showrunner for the second season if it was someone different? I don't really know enough about showrunners, to be honest. Like, it's gonna... You know what? This is gonna sound really weird, but if you want to do a Knives Out style mystery, go for Rian Johnson, because he did the Knives Out mystery, and he did it really well. I will say again, I did not like The Last Jedi. I felt like Rian Johnson took some leaps that didn't pay off. It wasn't completely his fault. I feel like, you know, he shouldn't have necessarily been given the entire story to write on his own. And I appreciate that he tried to be different, but it wasn't for me. I just didn't like it. But I feel like a movie like Knives Out is his forte. So give him that style of Star Wars show. Go for it. Have him do a Star Wars mystery. You know, that I think that he would do probably really well with. But I don't know enough about anything else. I think if Soul had a Padawan previously and tragically lost them, it would have made more sense for him to have a second chance of Osha. That's why I thought maybe with Chimera, he might be tied in some way with, you know, Soul. But Chimera feels oddly tacked on. And funnily enough, he is. Like, they openly said that if they couldn't get Manny Jacinto in to play Chimera, then Chimera wouldn't have been in this season. And it does feel like that in a way. It feels like he's been added in, you know, to the story at the last minute. And I'm not complaining about it because, you know, Manny Jacinto, he's got, you know, great arms. But it does kind of make you feel like it doesn't quite fit in sometimes. So, how about a younger Thrawn showing up? I don't think the timeline works out for a younger Thrawn showing up. You know, because in the books, he's still quite a young man when he meets Anakin for the first time. So, I don't think that would work out. Torben wasn't homesick. He felt unimportant because he came from a pauper's background. I mean, it was a mix of both. It was that he was homesick, and yes, he wanted to do something purposeful. He wanted to do something that he felt was important. You know, so it was a mix of both, because he wanted to go home to be able to do that, because they already told him, you know, this is important. You know, a virgin in the Force is important. So Sol explained that to him. But again, he was young, he was rash, he didn't quite, I think he didn't quite think as, you know, a mature person would. Agree, they tried too hard to be philosophical. It's weird because Russian Doll was also made by Leslie Headland and has so many layers and interesting characters. That's what I mean. That's why I'm wondering how much of this is actually all on her compared to, like, studio interference. It feels like, because maybe they said to her, you only get one season, guaranteed, she felt like she had to put all of this stuff in. And if they'd have come to her and just said, okay, we're going to give you guaranteed 2 to 3 seasons, she probably would have stretched out some of the elements and it might have flowed a bit better. So, you know, but it is unfortunately the case that people can have really good shows that they do, and then they can have really bad shows. Some people are just inconsistent, you know. Home for Torben was subtext for wanting to be someone. I mean, it was like I say, it's a bit of both. It's about 100 years early for Thrawn. He wouldn't have been born yet during this period. Yeah. Torben could have gone home, but still decided to go to the Witches. I'm trying to remember actually how that all came about and why he decided to go. I'm trying to remember actually. I only watched it the other day. What got him zooming off in the first place? Because it was when they discovered something. Like, I think it was to do with the convergence, wasn't it? I don't even know if he was going to get the twins. That might have been it. I don't know if he was just going to get the twins. I think they said that for all the characters, the writer had a specific actor in mind for each role. None of them had to audition. That's interesting. I know that was the case for Chimera, and I think I remember them saying something the same for Soul. But I mean, yeah, if you had, is it Amanda Stellberg in mind for the twins? I've not seen her in anything else. I hope she's better in other stuff, but I just don't rate her performance in this at all. Like, I just don't think she's playing a convincing character. And she's got 2 characters in this, you know. You know, she might be good in other stuff, but just this, I'm just not convinced. It feels like there may have been a studio interference, which is unfortunate. I'd venture a guess that the studio had an idea for what they wanted this show to be, and Leslie Headland had her own vision, and the two kind of never fully mixed, and as a result, we got a bit of a messy property, which is what it is here. Russian Doll is a fabulous series. I've heard good things. That's the thing, you know. Sad you quit with your review of Battlestar. I do hope to pick it up. I was enjoying it, you know, quite a bit. I might just watch it on my own time. Because, again, I don't have any plans to go back to reacting full time. I really don't. I'm much happier just doing it this way. For me, the reaction niche is dying. It's too saturated. There's too many fakes. There's too many posers. And with everything YouTube, things are always changing. Whether it's people or content or the algorithm. Reactions had their time. And now, if you haven't already made it, you know, it's all about drama reactions now. It's about the Moist Criticals and the Asmongold's as much as I don't like them, they are the ones that kind of dominate the reaction genre now, which is ironic given the fact that that's what the reaction genre was getting shit on for, only like 7 or 8 years ago. The High Council told him to go back and not interfere. He thought this was the Virgins, so he went anyway, even though they were told to go back. It's a bit confusing there. Yeah, I think the Council told them not to interfere, which is what Indara's initial intuition was and what she wanted them to do. She said, don't interfere. And yeah, it's like, I always assumed that Sol would be the one to jump the gun, because, he was clearly the one most wanting to take the twins. And but then it's, then Torben jumps the gun, and then Kalnaka gets his mind taken over. So it was all very, very strange. And again, when you think about it on a human level, people talk about Indara's decision to cover up at the end. I kind of understand that. I kind of understand Indara's position where she's like, look, we've already fucked up. We have already ruined this girl's life. She's lost everything because of us. And if we go and admit to the council what we did, they're going to kick her out on her arse, and she's going to end up with nothing. So we're gonna bite the bullet. We're going to cover this up and live with that on our conscience so that she can have a chance at a life, because otherwise we've just done complete damage. And I understand that perspective. What are you doing? Come on. Jump down. Good boy. But yeah, I other stuff I'm not so certain of, But like I say, Venestra is another one that we've got to tie up a story with here, because she's got the cover up to deal with. She has got the High Council and the Senate as well, it looks like, to deal with in that one episode. So again, just looking at it from the perspective of what we've got to cover in this final episode. Aftermath of the flashbacks, so that's both May and Sol and Osha and Chimera. They're 2 discussions. We've got to have the 2 sets meet at some point in space and chase each other down, because we've seen in the trailer, in the rings of the Brendok system, the 2 ships are chasing each other. We then have a showdown on Brendok between the 2 parties and whatever happens there. We've got the Venestra stuff to deal with, to see what happens with her. And then if you want to tease anything for next season with the Sith, someone showing up, whatever might happen, you've also got to put that in. And give it time. And, obviously the twins as well, the twins' backstory, like the Virgins, what are they? Why are they so special? So there's a lot to cover there, and I just can't see it being done in a satisfying way. So I'll probably forewarn you all now. The likelihood is that my reaction, whilst will be open and genuine, is probably not going to be massively positive if that goes the way I think it's going to go. But again, that's the way it's kind of gone through the season. If you look back at my reactions, they've always been genuine. They've always been in the moment. And I've not been afraid to say when I felt like something was off. But I've also not been afraid to praise stuff. Like, I still think, genuinely, the first 2 episodes are pretty good. Like, outside of some pacing issues, and the insistence on having transitional wipes all the time, I think those first 2 episodes set up a really interesting story. And it was kind of downhill from there until episode 5, and then it's been downhill again. Pardon me. I wonder if this is the series where the Jedi discover the rule of 2. Yoda knew about it in The Phantom Menace. I don't know. It depends on how they want to take the rule of 2 and its origins, because was it Darth Bane that came up with the rule of 2? And technically Darth Bane is canon if the Clone Wars is canon, because we saw his Force Ghost, or an imprint of him, whatever it might have been. So it just depends. And it's possible that, Yoda might have been doing some extracurricular research. So he might have known about the Sith in general. Just because, I always imagine, like, the head of the Jedi Order needs to know everything. Or at least as much as they can, even if it's not relevant. So I imagine that he probably just knew the Sith because he was the head of the Jedi Order. You need to read the book Splinter of the Mind's Eye. Is that the one that was originally the sequel to A New Hope? Was that like the I'm trying to remember whether that was the sequel or whether that was the original script rewritten. It's one of the old books, though, isn't it? Have I heard Headland's interesting comments about the Virgins? I've heard something about it, like it's going to get resolved, two separate consciousnesses. It's not the same as Anakin. I've heard generalized things. I try not to pay too much attention to the interviews because the less that I know, the better. Like, the less influence by anyone on me going into an episode, the better, because I don't want to come in with any massive preconceptions. Do I think there's going to be a post-credit scene in the last episode? If there is, it's definitely going to be a Sith Lord. It's going to be a Sith Lord. So, do I think it's going to be a Plagueis or Tenebris? I think Tenebris is more likely. Do I think Tenebris is going to be a Bith? No, I think... And this is where I think fans are probably going to get upset again. And this is a perfect example of fans saying, give us this, give us this. You give it to them, but just in a unique way. And then they're like, no, not like that. And honestly, I always felt like a Biff Sith was always stupid. Like, I'll just say it. Darth Tenebris looks stupid. Like, I don't mind if they change him. If they bring in a Darth Tenebris that is a different species, sure, go for it, whatever. As long as it works, like, from the perspective of the story, I'll go for it. Season 2 may not be bad. I mean, it depends on what story they want to tell with it, because if this is the end of the story for these characters, then, you know, they've got a fresh kind of story to work with. But I don't know. I mean, I still struggle to say that this has been bad. It's been bad at points. Overall, it's been mediocre. It's kind of been like, okay, it's definitely not what I would consider good. I don't feel the need to go and rewatch it, but it's by far and away not the worst thing I've ever said. Saw. Can't you tell I'm getting a little tired? It's supposed to be the sequel to the original Star Wars. Yes, I do. I remember seeing the cover to it. Yeah. In Legends, a Jedi went to the dark side and discovered that the Sith survived, and he told the Jedi just before he died, always two there are. I mean, it could be the same thing here. It's something different. Do I want to know? No, I'll wait. I'll wait and see. I like to remain as unspoiled as possible. Am I planning to read Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire? Yes, I didn't even realise until the other day that was out. It's something that I love the idea of. Like, given the point of views of, like, other characters during the events of the original trilogy. Sounds like my cup of tea. So I'm going to probably order it next week and read through it. And then I'll probably do a review in a few weeks' time. Some extra content, you know, because we are going to go into a little bit of a dry spell. Until Outlaws at the end of August, and then Skeleton Crew in November, December, whatever time that decides to come out. Just make whatever Sith it is another Zabrak. Yeah, it might be a little unimaginative. It might be, you know, it's one of those, isn't it? It's kind of like, if it's a human, it's kind of like, okay, well, sure, it can work. I like the idea of, like, more aliens, but I think for a Sith, there's got to be a specific look, you know. Plagueis, absolutely fine. I'm happy with a Moon to be a Sith Lord if they can kind of nail the character right. You know, I always felt like the Moon, the brief kind of look at the Moon we got in the prequels, they kind of looked like a lot of the other aliens because they were CGI. They didn't look very convincing. Obviously, illustrations are far better. The Bith just don't look... Again, I said this last week, the only reason the Bith exist in Star Wars is because they were a thrown away prop in L Street, I think it's L Street Studios, when A New Hope was filmed. George Lucas, for the cantina scene, basically was running on a budget, and he said to his set designers and his costume makers, go and find whatever you can. They rummaged through the studio. They found little bits and bobs and either used them outright or put together costumes from, you know, what they could find. That's why in the original versions, you've got a Wolfman, You've got a giant grasshopper. You know, all these aliens that kind of look a bit weird and Doctor Who-y is because they're basically made from props that would have been probably involved in a show like Doctor Who. So, yeah. Kind of reminds me of Star Wars Resistance is to all other animated series. My least favourite as far as storyline I could get into. Yeah, Resistance is an interesting one because I enjoyed the first season of that. And then the second season felt so boring. Like, it got to a point where I felt like I'd watched the same episode back to back to back. It was always the same. It was either a race or the characters having to, like, infiltrate a First Order base and then they got out, luckily, somehow. It felt like the same story being repeated over and over again up until they got to, like, the last couple of episodes. And the second season just wore thin on me. The first season, it was interesting because it was the setup. There was some interesting character moments. I liked the idea that, you know, we've not explored this timeline before. But then, second season, it just felt like a lot of repeated material just to get them to the finale. I'll say it's like the Bad Batch season 3. It felt like they only had enough story to cover half a season, and they had to really stretch it. And that's why, you know, I don't think season 3 of the Bad Batch was that good, because it starts off really strong, first few episodes, but then it felt like they didn't know how to get to the end of the story and stretch it. So they had a lot of this, like, nonsensical, meaningless filler in the middle, and then they got to, like, the last 2 or 3 episodes. Like, if you look at that final season, like, Omega gets rescued, only to then get captured again, only to get rescued again, and it's kind of like, it felt a little unnecessary, you know? And I say rescued, she escaped, you know? I don't know, it didn't quite flow for me. We have other Star Wars aliens are cool. I just like the look of the original Sith species. Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, if they do decide to do another Zabrak, or, you know, bring in the original Sith species, I wouldn't have a problem with it. It's just one of those you'll probably just think, well, it's a little unimaginative. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe there won't even be a Sith show. You know? Fuck it. Just have it be something that isn't even humanoid-like in shape, you know? Have it be an octopus. The Sith octopus. You know? I know people were talking about that creature that was supposed to be in Rise of Skywalker that was sat on top of the baby's head. They said, bring that in. I think that's a bit out there. Because apparently that was supposed to be the thing that taught Plagueis. That was like the original concept. As whatever this thing was the thing that, you know, was Plagueis' master. And they ditched it. They built the model for it and everything. And then they ditched it at the last minute because, I mean, to be honest, it was supposed to be on Mustafar, I think. That creature came into it, and a lot of the Mustafar stuff on Rise of Skywalker got cut. Like, that's the frustrating part about that movie, is that it felt like it was constantly 220 miles an hour, never stopping for a moment to let you kind of relax. And yet there was still some good stuff that they really left out. I just didn't get it, but that's why it's my least favourite of the sequels. So, yeah, we're getting close to showtime. So, come on, folks, give me predictions. What do we think is going to happen in the finale? Who do we think is going to die? I think that May is going to die, either protecting Osha, or Osha is going to merge together with May, and they're going to become one being. So one of them will technically die, but they'll end up as one person with both of their experiences. I'm torn on whether Soul survives. I'm fairly certain Chimera will survive. Unless I think the only way Chimera dies is if a Sith Master shows up and realises what he's been doing. I think that might be what happens. Rooting for David Harwood to be made up as a moon, to be Plagueis, maybe showing up at the end to stomp Chimera just for being a Jedi. See, but could a moon be done in practical effects, is the thing, because the head is very narrow. I don't know if it could. I think a moon would have to be partly CGI. In the same way the Grand Inquisitor looked weird because, his head is supposed to be a little bit more, like, tall, but they just decided to have him have a big round head. So I think if you're going to have a live-action moon, it's going to be part CGI. It might still be played by David Harwood. Or Harewood, if I'm going to have to pronounce it. Osha kills Soul. I feel like Soul will probably sacrifice himself to redeem his mistakes. Soul might die. I have a bad feeling about him. Chimera definitely lives. I hope Chimera survives. He's such a great character. Also, more Manny and his arms, please. Just give him a big forehead. You just stick some kind of prosthetic on. It still wouldn't help because they're supposed to be really narrow-headed, the moon, aren't they? So you'd have to resize his whole body if he wants to make that head look thin. He'd have to be a 10-foot tall, really wide moon. So yeah, a lot of consensus that people want Chimera to survive. We think Soul might die, either sacrificing himself or Osha killing him. I'm kind of along those lines. And yeah, I hope that Chimera does survive and we get him as a centre focus of the second season, because honestly, I want to see more of him and his motivations and his history. That's another thing we've got to tie up. What the hell happened to him with the Jedi? Are we going to be able to finish all that in one episode? How? How are we going to finish this all in half an hour? I just do not think we can do it. Just add a single horn to the forehead. Venestra makes a special presentation to the High Council and sweeps it all under the rug. Yeah, I can foresee that being the case. I figured that she might... My original theory was that she was going to show up and kill everyone. Just from the perspective of keeping it all covered up. Not because she's a secret Sith or, a big bad. Just because she's quite morally grey and she realised that this has gotten out of hand and she needs everyone out of the picture. That was my original theory. That could still happen, but with a Sith Lord. And she just covers it up. Although, how she would know that Soul was gone, I don't know. That's the problem, is trying to tie that together, because to cover it up, she needs to know for certain that Soul is dead. And that no one can reveal the truth. Because the only person left who knows the truth, other than the twins, is Soul. And Chimera, I guess. David is no stranger to motion capture. Yeah, didn't he play... I've not seen it, but did he play Martian Manhunter or someone like that? I don't know. He's played an alien character, hasn't he? Can't wait for Nerdrotic's watch party. This show is so cringe. It's fun to rag on it. Can't wait for the YouTube content after. Does it not get boring knowing, exactly what they're going to say? Worst Star Wars ever. It's that's kind of I just think that'd be boring. I already can see the thumbnail. I can see the title. It's yeah, we get it. You don't like it. What's new? What's entertaining about that? I like a little bit of I like a little bit of analytical thought go into my analysis of shows, rather than just kind of sticking with the prevailing theory that I didn't like this before it came out, so I'm just going to continue to not like it and not give it any credit whatsoever. That's for me, the height of the sort of disingenuous nature of the grifters like Nerdrotic and Star Wars Theory is they can't even give a little bit of credit where things are good. The choreography, the costumes. It's everything has to focus on the negative. Everything has to be about what's terrible. And it's that's why that there's an agenda at play, because they won't allow their feelings, even if it's slight, their feelings of positivity win through, because they know immediately the audience will jump on them. The audience will be well, you can't like that. This is woke, and there's all these agendas. It's well, I still haven't seen an agenda. I still haven't seen any wokeness affecting the story here. It's I don't know. But like, if that's your thing, that's your thing. If you like watching the same person saying the same thing over and over again, like yelling into the microphone, sure, go for it. Shows some of the best lightsaber choreography in Star Wars, yet some of the worst pacing. Yeah, that sums it up pretty well. Nerdrotic is cringe for sure. Hey, but cringe pays the bills, you know? Bring back Yord as a Ford Ghost to make Simon happy. I mean, I'll always still have Yord in my heart, you know, from that first episode. Yeah, he played Martian Manhunter in Supergirl. Yes, I kind of remember. Didn't that get canned because of the really bad CGI? Am I right in thinking? Because that's all I can remember. I've not seen Supergirl. I was not really into the CW universe. It's more honesty. They usually have very deep dive reviews, including 3-hour reviews praising House of the Dragon this past Sunday. They praise Chimera and Soul's actors for sure. Mainly it's the writing deep dive. But again, it's like they were writing off the show before the show even came out. And it's like that's the whole point. It's like mainly it's a writing deep dive because mainly they just want to shit on the show. Like House of the Dragon doesn't matter. House of the Dragon isn't Star Wars. Like, don't care. You know, they seem to have this strange agenda with Star Wars because there is an audience there that will pay money to watch them rag on it, you know. And sure, they might say, oh yeah, I really like Manny Jacinto. I think he's great. But then they'll spend 3 hours and only talk about the perceived bad writing. Which, don't get me wrong, I don't think the writing has been brilliant, but I don't think it's been terrible. You know, this show is a mixture of good and bad. But they only ever seem to focus on the negative. They've got the clickbait thumbnails, they've got the big all-caps titles, and every episode is the worst Star Wars ever. Because apparently, yes, it's always the worst Star Wars ever until the next Star Wars. You know, and like I say, if that's your thing, I feel bad, but sure, more power to you. You know? I just hope that it gives us a good ending, unlike some recent Disney content where it gives us a good premise but rushed endings. This series was almost all about backstories. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a good ending. I think it's going to be rushed. I think that it's not been given enough time. I think we're setting ourselves up for a disappointment. I didn't think Andor would be good, but quickly turned around when it was good, despite having diversity of things people said they hate. Yeah, but that's only because their audience started to like it. Do you not see the trend? Where, like, the audience, they follow the audience that they have. If an audience says, it's okay for you to like this because I like this, then they'll say they like it. You know, Andor was that. You know? It's kind of like, you know, they will just follow the trends because that's how you make money. You know, if you try and go against the grain with your audience, you're going to start losing subs, losing viewers. You know, people might accuse you of being woke, and there's nothing worse in the world than them being accused of being woke, you know? So it's kind of like there's no, you know, there's no middle ground with them. It's kind of just like they go with the majority of their audience, and their audience is already stuck in a mindset, you know? Plus, it'd be very, very hard to criticize Andor because it was genuinely a fantastic show. So, if I see honest reviews or honest reactions in the video or channel title, I immediately skip. I mean, if I see anything kind of like worst ever, or if I see anyone like manipulating images to like have googly eyes, or there's fire, or, you know, it's all kind of overdone, it's kind of like, I just know immediately, it's like, yeah, you're just after a certain type of audience. You're just after you know, a certain person for them to latch onto you and to feed off the negativity. And don't get me wrong, I could very easily have gone down the same route. When I put out my review for The Last Jedi, 350,000 views. Made a second one after I'd watched it again, 200,000 views. And there was a part of myself that said, hey, I could make another 50 videos shitting on The Last Jedi. That might, and you know, I might keep picking up the audience. I might keep picking up subscribers and viewers. And I could have gone down that route, but I didn't because I didn't want to. Because I wasn't interested in that. Because I thought, okay, I don't really want to think about The Last Jedi now because I didn't like it. Let's move on. So it's kind of like they made that decision to chase the money, to chase the clout. That's their decision. I just try not to let it affect me. So anyway, we're gonna get ready. There's only like 5 minutes to go. I'm gonna go make a cup of tea, get ready to get the reaction on the go. So that'll be out a little bit later on. So yes, be sure to stick around for that. If any of you aren't subscribed, what are you doing? Subscribe, come on. I'm kidding. But yeah, thanks for catching up with me. I'm gonna do a comprehensive review, breakdown of each episode at some point in the next week. So keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, guys, I hope you enjoy the finale. I hope it is better than we expect, but we'll wait and see. So thank you for hanging out with me for the last hour and a half, and